Welcome to the second hour of MindShifters Radio. Today is Wednesday, June the 11th, 2025. And I'm glad that you all are with us. Michael will be with us here momentarily. I'll go ahead and make a couple announcements. So on Monday, well, starting this Friday through the 23rd, Dr. Tim won't be doing a radio show because he's on a trip. So on Monday the 16th, we're going to be taking from 12 o'clock until 2 o'clock, and we're going to discuss MindShifters StillPoint Breathing and actually let people breathe if they're willing to do that. Hi, Michael. And
hey, sweetie.
Your video's going. Okay, and so we'll be doing that. You don't have to breathe, but you're invited to, and we ask that you have your camera on so that Michael can facilitate, and we will not be showing the video when we post it to YouTube, so you don't have to worry about it going live. No, there will not be two links. It'll be just the one link. It'll be the link to our show. We'll just start it an hour early, and it'll go for the full 2 hours. And then also in November, we have confirmed with the facility in Abingdon, Virginia, where we just did a 9-day why. And we've also confirmed with Urate about doing the food. So we're going to be doing a 9-day intuitive development from November the 14th to the 22nd.
And the food was awesome.
Yes, it was.
Urate just did a fabulous job. She introduced a whole new concept in food called the Nutritarian Food Program and did food according to that. So the food was just really fabulous.
Yeah. And I'm going to be sending out a newsletter. So later this morning after the radio show, I will be sending out a newsletter with the information for both the breathing and also for the intensive. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll be getting that. And otherwise, Sally says she's going to be there in November. So
sweet.
Awesome. Yay. All right.
Fabulous.
So I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted and honored that we're here. We got all primed up. We got a couple of folks who are on our call at 10:30, Susan's MindShifters support group, and we had a pretty interesting discussion about ending war. There were a lot of interesting points made, and we're hoping that Susan will get permission from everyone. She did record this, and so once she's got permission, she's going to share that video with us, and we'll put it on the YouTube channel. So we'll let you know if and when that comes together. And Susan, Carrie, you were both on. Of course, everybody that was here was invited, but both Susan and Carrie were on the conversation. So I'll open it to both of you and see if there's any continuing conversation to be had in regard to what opened up. I thought the flow of information went beautifully, especially with the sharing that was done about the near life experience and such. It all made for a pretty powerful conversation, I thought. So Carrie, Susan B, seeing as how we've got Susan F and Susan B today, any thoughts? Carrie, your mic's open. Go for it.
Hi, thank you, Michael, for that conversation this morning. It was really great. And we also had another woman who joined us, and I came a little bit late to that conversation, Rakama Myers, who joined us. So maybe Susan can tell us a little bit about her. What was interesting to me, because the question came up about war and ending war, and how there's lots of spiritual people have talked about a kind of tipping point where to end war, we have to become peace. And we have to do that one individual at a time.
Right.
And it was so interesting to me because you were talking about, take a look at your personal wars that are going on, like your war with the person who sleeps beside you in bed, or your war with your children, or with somebody at work, or all of those things, which is what your forgiveness work is all about, and that it goes into. And I brought up the point that I saw that Israel and the Palestinians were acting out generations upon generations of trauma. And
An old family squabble.
right, and we can only heal that trauma within. And that as we become peace, like as we become love, then that has an energetic ripple effect that goes out into the world. And as that energetic ripple effect grows and becomes stronger and stronger, with more and more people doing this work, and that's what I'm seeing. My Facebook feed is just full of love and people who are doing this work in different ways, and I'm so heartened. And so thank you for that affirmation too, about being attentive to self, practicing that presence of observing yourself and healing those disintegrative energies. And I think you said something like, if you heal all those disintegrative energies, and you love your body, and you you heal yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, on all of those different levels. People say, oh yeah, you healed yourself spiritually. Well, I don't think you do, because spiritually you are healed, you are love, you are peace, you are those things. At that level, there's nothing to be healed. It's all on this level of the world is false perception. And we also had a conversation about death, and uh, one of the people on the call was talking about his out-of-body experiences, and how that transformed his life in terms of fear and realizing that he could not die. And, that's what I've learned also through Course in Miracles. And I've taken that really to heart from other people's experiences in their life between lives, is that when this physical body dies and we separate from the
If we
physical
kill it.
body, we just say, oh, I just woke up from that dream, so that's our real self. And this world is but a dream, really. It really is a dream. And we feel like it's so real.
We could make up a poem about that.
Yeah, we could make up.
Merrily, 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 something like that.
Yeah. And, people don't take that to heart, they don't believe it, because this feels so real.
And of course, the word illusion, interestingly enough, in Aramaic, does not mean, as this culture would say, something that doesn't exist. The word illusion means measured. And so when Yeshua says, as you measure will be measured unto you, into your illusion will come whatever you've engaged in the way of mind energy. The opening words in the book of John do not say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh, but rather in the beginning was the mind energy. And so whatever we measure in the way of mind energy, if it's hostility or fear, then it's going to be measured back to us out of what we've put into our structures. And once we recognize that and take responsibility, then of course the whole game changes. So I'm with you on that one.
And what other people don't realize too is, well, if it's just my dream, how come other people have, we interact with other people and other people say, yeah, trees are real and I see this. How come we're all dreaming the same dream? It's because we are all one and we have created this dream as a kind of agreement. And I don't know what that agreement is. I don't know if it's an agreement to experience, if it's an agreement to work things out, if it's agreement to make sure that we can return to our true nature, which is love. I don't know what that agreement is, but we made an agreement to create this dream together.
And it's time for healing.
Mm-hmm.
If we find that we've measured into our dream all kinds of terror and trauma, or that's been measured in for us, apparently, i.e., we are the victim of that, or appear to be the victim of that. And of course, the belief in victimhood is all just another story we tell ourselves because we, at one point, chose to or decided to become members of the one world universal religion of guilt, fault, blame, and suffering. And until that membership's given up, whatever it is we've measured is going to tend to continue. And
Yes, and
change is possible.
one last thing, too, about locking the trauma into our bodies, so that it presents itself as disease or discomfort or whatever. Um, and this can be generational, it can be environmental. There's all different ways that this trauma gets locked in the body, but holding the breath. Um, uh, and I've heard you say this, I don't know, 100 times, but it really resonated with me. I think partly because I want to come and do some breath work with you. But as we receive the breath within us, it goes through our whole body. It goes through our whole physiology, and I think it also goes through our auric body and our other bodies. And
At least it's designed to.
Yeah, that's where we can release that trauma, um, because I think you said something about so in the beginning was the word that came from the Old Testament, but I think you also said something else that was interesting to me about in the beginning was the breath or something. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, the opening in John traditionally is interpreted by the Greeks as, and I say interpreted because there are no Greek translations of the Aramaic words of Yeshua. They don't exist. Lots of people talk like they do. Oh, look at all these Greek translations. There are no Greek translations. There are Greek interpretations, but they are so far from the original meanings that in no way, shape, or form can we properly call them translations. But the typical interpretation is in the beginning was the word and the word became flesh. But in Aramaic, what it says is in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. So we have the ability to either buy into the mind energy that's in our genes, in our family system, in our culture. We have the option of buying into the brainwash of the hostility and fear-based war culture. And if we do, then that's literally it literally is proven that becomes actual chemistry in the cell. And applying forgiveness means that we can remove those literal chemicals from the cell and eradicate what have been called physical diseases. But I think the other point you're referring to that came up in the discussion earlier today was that in the Old Testament creation story, we're classically told is God sent out his spirit. But in Aramaic, what it says is the Creator sent out its breath. Ruka Dekucha in Aramaic is the term. It was interpreted by the Greeks as the Holy Spirit, but there's nothing there about a disembodied spirit being. It literally is the actual literal breath of the Creator. And so, and defined more fully in terms of its activity from the Aramaic, what Rukudakucha is a feminine elemental force in us that, by definition, if we give it permission, will undo the effects of our errors and teach us the truth. And so tapping into and making that connection with full permission, because we've got free will. And if there's somewhere that, in our free will, we said, no, I'm going to keep this rage because, my family system taught me rage protects me, therefore I'm going to keep it. Then somebody goes on and, in a thousand different times says, oh, well, this rage is so traumatic. I want to get rid of it. I want to get rid of it. I want to get rid of it. But as long as there's the free will that says my rage protects me, I can ask for that to be removed till the cows come home. It's not going to move until I actually am willing to be done with it. And so this feminine elemental force, is the only thing that can move anything in the universe. I use an example of, and it'll be rhetorical, but, if we had a room full of people, I'd be saying, how many here know how to raise your arm? And most everybody in the room would raise their arm. And I would say, no. I didn't ask you if you could raise your arm. I asked you if you knew how. And nobody knows how to raise their arm. I don't care if you are the best physiologist, anatomist in the world. I guarantee you cannot tell me what brain cells fire at what voltages and follow what nerve pathways to get to what muscles at exactly what balance and counterbalance there is to raise your arm. Nobody even has a clue how to do that. But there's something in us that does, and that something takes instructions from us. And that something was called, in the ancient teachings, the Father within. And you'll notice it wasn't some distant power. According to Yeshua, he talks about it as being our Father, whose good pleasure it is to give us everything. And
including free will.
And the free will's there. And if we don't know any better and we choose suffering, or we decide to suffer because that's what's in our genes, then the Creator doesn't say, I gave you free will, but I really didn't mean for you to choose this. The Creator just says, well, of the works of my hands, command ye me, and I'll do what you asked for. There's only one power in the universe that can move anything. And that power has become subject to our will. And so if we've willed disease, suffering, and trauma, and all you have to do is allow those frequencies to cross your mind, literally. The way that a signal crosses an antenna, if I've got my TV set tuned to channel 2, and the signal from channel 2 crosses my antenna, I've got a picture and sound. There's no interrupting. There it is. It's there. And so if a frequency crosses my mind, the Creator says yes to me. That's the only answer the Creator's got for me, is yes. Now I can say, well, but gee, for 5 years now, I've been saying I want a peaceful, wonderful life. I want conflict-free relationships. That's what I've been asking the Creator for. Okay, so how many opportunities have you had to free yourself of conflict, let's say in your relationships? Did you do it? Well, what do you mean? Well, if you find yourself in conflict, everybody says, I want conflict-free relationships, but what they don't realize is you can't have conflict-free relationships until you become a conflict-free being. And that's the work of Yeshua, is to show us how to become conflict-free beings. And all you have to do is overcome, 1,000 generations of, what kind of unresolved dynamics did any of us watch our parents have to deal with and work through, our grandparents, their parents. What kind of stories have we heard? What have we been told? Aunts, uncles, cousins, what's been going on in the family system?
Yeah, then you heal one thing in that family system and it ripples out through the generations.
Exactly.
And it's amazing to me too, because that divine feminine elemental force is also worshipped in many Eastern religions. The divine feminine, it's called.
Right.
And
yes.
That is an extreme, the powerful force. And if you think about it, you can ask for this and that, but we also have to take action.
Absolutely.
I think if you say, oh, I want abundance in my life, well, what are you going to do to create that abundance? Are you going to get rid of your blocks? Because abundance may be flinging itself to you all over the place, but you push it away, for example. Things like that. It's like we need to take action and do the work. And a lot of people really aren't willing to do that, I have
True.
found.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that I think happens that people don't dig in and do the work is that they have tried so many things so many times and it's failed and they've just come to the conclusion that nothing will work. So why should I try this? But anybody who actually puts their hand to the plow, and of course, once you do that, as Yeshua said, there's crazy glue on the handle. Once you put your hand to the plow, you can't take it off. Then you just continue to do your work. But until you do, all of the ineffective things that people have said will work, I think lead people to just be, it's kind of hopeless, helpless. Here I am. Why is this happening to me again and again and again and again and again? Well, that should be a clue. You're the only one that was there every time. So do your work. And that's when things really begin to change.
Okay, so thank you, Michael. And I don't know if Susan wanted to share anything. I don't want to hog this.
Right. And just one other thought, you had mentioned that you wanted to breathe. And the last time we talked, Jeanie was having surgery and had some restrictions, and she's off restriction next week. So I will have the liberty, if you have a time frame past the next a week Monday, then we can go ahead, whatever time frame works, set it up. So,
okay, we'll talk.
All right.
Let's talk.
Cool. Yeah. So, Miss Susan, do you have any thoughts on our session this morning? I thought it was fabulous, and
I did.
I'm hoping we get everybody's permission to just go ahead and share it.
Yeah, I can't imagine we won't. Carrie, you asked who the woman was. That was my husband Tim's sister, who lives in Santa
beautiful.
Fe, and she has been a member of our group for a long time, although her schedule doesn't allow her. In fact, she was coming back and forth to our group because she had a double schedule there. She has another meeting that happens at the same time, so she's been missing a lot of them. So they're Rahamana.
Beautiful, beautiful lady.
Yeah, she is. She's a gem.
Definitely a gem.
Michael, I had a question. We're talking about doing our own work, clearing our own goals and hang-ups or whatever you want to call them, so that we can be the active presence of love and help heal the planet, starting with ourselves. There's also something in the Course in Miracles that says, or maybe you say it, I forget where it came from. If we have the slightest irritation, it is a sign that we have a huge rage.
Yeah, that's the Course.
So that's the Course.
Slightest irritation covers the deepest rage. Yeah.
So all I'm saying is when I hear that, I think, how can we be the active presence of love when we've got that in our system and there's so much of it that, as Tim Hayes and of you said, we never finish our work. There are always.
Well, I'm not sure we never finish our work. I say that I don't know anybody, and include myself in that, who has finished their work yet.
Okay.
I think there is a completion point. It's a pretty massive piece of work to do, but yeah, I believe we can reach a completion point. But how do we do it?
Sorry, say again.
Your question was, how do we ever become that presence of love?
Well,
if there's that level of work to do?
Yeah, or I could reword it to saying, can we be the active presence of love even though that work is not done?
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank God.
Yeah, we can bring that experience in. And my experience is it tends to come in degrees. My experience is that at first you get a taste of it. You hit a new level of vitality and all hell breaks loose, and you might be lost in it for years, literally.
Mhm.
I've seen people do that who've come to this work, been excited about it, and gone, "Oh yeah, this is great," and then one day the hits the fan, and literally, I've seen it take 10 years for somebody to come back and say, what was that? And what was that you were saying 10 years ago? Tell me
Yeah.
again.
Right.
So,
Right.
when and I think that kind of ties in with that metaphor of the flood. When the flood comes, that emotion, water oftentimes represents emotion. It just overtakes, and we go unconscious and can be lost for extended periods of time. But as one keeps coming back and doing the work layer by layer by layer, I think that physiology, there are times where the governing energy, let me use a metaphor here. You probably can remember a time when, maybe you drove back and forth to work and you were listening to your nice, quiet FM music on the way to work, but there was one corner, or pardon me, you listened to your nice, quiet, peaceful music on your favorite AM station, but there was one corner that you would reach on your journey to work, and all of a sudden that station would disappear and in would come this raucous rock and roll noise on top of it. It
Right.
was one particular place. The way that an AM radio works is that you have to have a certain percentage of signal strength, and when that percentage is reached, then that signal is the only one that can operate through that system. And I mixed those up. So that's the FM radio. You
Mhm.
lose a signal, a new signal comes in, but only one signal governs the radio set at a
I
time.
see. Mhm.
An AM radio, it can switch back and forth, and 2 or 3 stations can come in at once because there isn't that sort of a gating mechanism.
Mhm.
My take and my experience is that when we hit a certain level of connectedness to being, and we've done sufficient work to weaken the hostility and fear-based mind, then that presence of love becomes the governing frequency. Now, I'm walking through the world and my neighbor gives me the look and up comes my rage. Well, that signal's going to take over.
Mhm.
But my experience has been, and as I observe my own physiology in my own life and the people that I've worked with, is that in the early stages of doing their work, somebody gives them the look and all hell breaks loose and, they're lost. But as they move through the masses, the heavier loads of work, there's still maybe some of the deepest work still to be done, which is oftentimes genetic. That's still there to be done, but it's not in your face so much until an experience comes that resonates it, and then you get to do another piece of work. So I think you can you get larger and larger gaps between layers of things being stirred up that take you out of that experience of love.
Maybe that's what the phrase wounded healer means. That
Yes,
we can heal even though we're still wounded. We're
exactly.
still have our garbage.
And it's only the wounded that have, really effectively gone in and done the work that can say, okay, here's how that works, because I've been there,
Yeah.
done that. And
Yeah.
otherwise it becomes theory, and there are lots of people out there with all kinds of highfalutin theories. But,
Yeah.
but what really happens as a result of them, where you take the tools as Yeshua presented them and you actually apply them, and I mean, literally, it's reliable. The non-being mind will get quieter and quieter and quieter, and the still small voice will become more and more available.
One of the pitfalls or temptations right now is that the situation externally in our country and in the world gains in intensity. The temptation on our part would be to want to hurry up or be in a panic I'm talking about myself. We've got to get to work quick, quick, quick. And that is a kind of trigger, and that's a kind of fear. We're in danger of increasing our own fear threshold because of what's going on outside. So our work is not only our inner work, but to be aware of the onslaught of scary news. And I know people on both sides of the fence are frightened. We're frightened of them, and they're frightened of us, and they're telling all kinds of stories. So
Of course,
that's
nobody's frightened of anybody, but there are a lot of people walking around with fear that pointed at anybody who's handy.
right. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll mute myself now. You answered my question. Thanks a lot. And thanks, Carrie.
Sweet. Well, we're about halfway through our hour, and as soon as we find out, basically the session that Susan does on Wednesdays with her MindShifters group, usually she does not record. But because we were talking about healing war today, she recorded it. And we're thinking that everybody who was in the group, who was a small group, will be happy if we go ahead and just make it available, the whole thing available. So if that occurs, then we'll be putting it on our YouTube channel, and we'll let you know as soon as that gets cleared. And also, Susan, if you would, I would like to get Rahmani's phone and email so I can send her that information I said I would. So if you are out there in listener land, what's exciting in your world? And if no one has a thought for us, then I have some thoughts to share. But I'll give you a few seconds to unmute yourself if you have a question or something to share or a direction you'd like to take the conversation. I'm wide open. Okay, well, part of our conversation today was that this article that I wrote about healing war, and it's kind of in a state of uproar with all the discussion I've had going on with it. I'm doing several pieces about it, so it'll be a little while before it's available again, before we'll make it available when I do get it to another finished state. By the way, Susan, I hardly ever touch my computer anymore, so all of the writing that I do on my phone, where I don't have spell check. And I apologize for sending that article and the mess it was after I went back and actually plugged it into my computer and looked at the spelling, and some of it was kind of messy. But
that happens.
I
we all understand that.
Yeah, I pretty much always just write on my phone. I hardly ever touch my computer anymore. So anyway, I was a bit appalled when I looked at it, at the state of it when I put it on the computer and could see it in a word processor with spell check and all. In any event, the article started out by talking about Job and the really profoundly powerful lesson that Job has to offer us as human beings. And that insight comes in Job's experience as he's going through this loss of everything. And after his loss, he has an insight. And the insight that he offers is that he realizes that it's his own pathology that he's dealing with that has caused his loss. He phrases it like this: "For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me, and what I dreaded has happened to me." And so, in essence, what Job is saying there is, what I realized is, I am a creator. And I created this thing. And recognizing that he created it, he really offers a really deep, rarely comprehended lesson on responsibility and how the world actually works and how creatorship works. He literally, when you've got the eyes to see and the ears to hear, when you've got the brain cells for it, he literally is explaining the physics, the psychology, the emotional dynamics of how repeating widespread traumatic events, including war and suffering, are created and then pass from generation to generation. You know, that statement, it's like my fear, my dread, my mental illnesses, you know, fear and dread are pathological states in the human energy system. And he realizes, and it's interesting, if you go and read the whole book, it's really a story about a healing crisis. You'll notice that he has this insight very early in the crisis, very early in the process, but he can't do anything with it at that point because he's still in the middle of his own muddle. He's still in his confusion. He's still in his trauma. But he realizes that his troubles are a result of the functioning of his own mind. And so he goes through this process and begins to move away from, he gives up, as we repeatedly invite people to do here, gives up his membership card in the one world universal religion of blame. And you'll notice when he gives that up, and that's the point where he says, oh, that which I feared most, that's what I dreaded. It came early in his process, but he did not heal at that moment. It was the beginning of his insight. But what he's doing is he has this humbling insight that when fear and dread are running his mind, he's working against his own best interests. Now, in our culture, fear is just like, well, that protects you, you know, so what? That's not a big deal. Fear, ladies and gentlemen, fear is a mental illness. Fear destroys physiology. Fear takes us out of our natural creative state and puts us into a state where, one, we tend to blame others for our own dysfunctional minds and results. And until we can recognize that until we can recognize I am a creator, and this dysfunctional mind of mine has produced dysfunctional results, until I can own that, the healing process is going to escape me. But when he steps into that life-changing admission that he's the cause of his own suffering, the loss and the traumatic events in his life, when he recognizes that, now he doesn't move the blame card, you know, his membership card in the one world universal religion of blame, to himself. He moves into responsibility. He's thrown away that card. And that's a pretty tough thing to do. He recognizes and he owns the fact that he has a particularly pernicious form of unconscious mental self-abuse. The mental illnesses of both fear and dread. If we are inflicted with those, there is a solution to that. There are tools for dealing with that. But pretending that what's going on in one's life is somebody else's fault is not one of those tools. So the first step, you know, in being able to work through it is to recognize it for what it is, and then to work with the truth of what's possible. And the truth of what's possible is anything going on in the human realm is healable if you have the tools and you're willing to use them. So first step, to own that. And to give up the looking outside of ourselves for the problem and looking outside of ourselves for the solution. And once one recognizes one's own part, then one can start to develop the pattern or the capacity to choose. You know, this carbon-based memory system, this body-mind unit, is filled with 1 billion decisions. It's a decision-making machine. It is on automatic pilot. A situation shows up and your mind has a decision for it. One of the things that you need to develop is no power, N-O power. The ability to say no to your own mind when it's doing its blame game. The healing process begins when we take that step. And the mind will, time after time after time after time after time, bring up this decision. What's a decision? It's something that happens via an automatic process of resonance. If I say, let's use an example. If I say, don't think about the color of your car, what moves in your mind? Something about the color of your car. And most people would say, if I said, now, what are you thinking about? They'd say, well, the color of my car. And my offer is, the person who'd be thinking about the color of the car in response to my statement, don't think about the color of your car, is not thinking. It's just cycling information. It's an automatic machine that's taken over. It's resonance. There's just an energy exchange and it takes over. To think is to be able to interrupt that process of decisions and introduce something new to the mind. And that takes functioning out of conscious awareness as the conscious active presence of love that is able to change perhaps 1,000 generations of decisions of, this is the way we do it in our family. When this situation occurs, the going gets tough, the tough go shopping, or the tough start blaming. That's how we do it. Well, that's a decision that will never serve you. And it's going to take choice, the spiritual faculty of choice, coming into the mind saying, excuse me, we're not doing that anymore. That's the first step that has to happen. But if you keep playing out and, modeled for all of us by our power person was the behavior that probably none of us, when our power person was under stress, they modeled for us a behavior that none of us would ever consciously choose to do. And yet, if we don't know how the mind works, when we're under stress, we'll do exactly what our power person did to us that we hated the most. We'll do that to somebody else or even to ourselves because it's looped in the mind. When we live in this mind that's fueled by fear and dread, as Job was, his suffering seemed hopeless. Hold a newborn and tap into the presence of love that is the newborn life. Tap into that presence of love as who you are and start to interrupt the loops that have been installed in your mind by generations and generations and generations of power person dynamics. So Job, when you really unpack what his simple statement is, that which I feared most, that which I dreaded, he's informing us that when we live in a mind run by fear and dread and apply those mental energies to some fantasized outcome or to a genetically implanted unresolved issue, we set a blueprint for the events that are going to be delivered to us. we set our creative process in motion. And then, of course, if we add additional emotional amplifiers to that fear and dread, things like greed and guilt, hostility, then we've got the perfect formula for victimhood and the why is this happening to me again, the repeated trauma. And this is the definition of a mental illness. And then you read through that whole text, and it's really interesting where the solution comes in, how he heals. And it's not what you'd expect. You know, if you're not familiar with the book, there's this, once he loses everything, I mean, literally he's a very wealthy man. His wealth is gone. His barn's burned down. His children are killed. I mean, he loses everything. And his friends come to lament. They come to question him on what his sin was. They, rail on God. I mean, he goes through this whole process with his whole community of friends, whom at some points he's not very happy with. In other words, he loses the ability to function as love in relationship to his friends. And the point where he gets the big turnaround is he, in a practical sense, brings into expression what would be identified several thousand years later by the man named Yeshua as the first law. I mean, if you remember, Yeshua is asked this question, what's most important in the law? And Yeshua replies, first of all, he doesn't reply with what the Greeks said he replied with, love your neighbor, love God as yourself. And I repeat this often because it goes so against what the words we've been given, the language we've been fed through these Greek translations. He doesn't say love them. He says have rachma for the Creator, for your neighbor. And by so doing, you maintain your human life. There's the solution to healing, having a human life. There's the healing force that dissolves all trauma, no matter how deep or how old it is. It is delivered on the breath, the Ruka Dakudsha, but you've got to have that human life first, the presence of love. Now, you were given that at your first breath. There's your saving grace right there. And so when they asked Yeshua what's most important, he said, here it is. This is it. Have rachma when you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor. For by so doing, you preserve your human life. In rachma, there is no such concept in English, Latin, or Greek, the languages that our Aramaic words have been translated into or transposed into. And rachma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that is the gateway that gives admittance to your human life, to your human form. If hostility or fear are active, that gateway is closed. It's not available. There's no human life in there. The form looks human, but there's no human life in there, active, if rachma is closed down. So when you read this book of Job, he's had some upset toward his neighbors. His neighbors have not been, they've been somewhat compassionate with him, but somewhat, okay, Job, what was your sin? What did you do? What did you do wrong? But where his big turnaround comes is he reconnects with the active presence of love. And then what it says is he prayed for his neighbors. Now, does that mean he went, Our Father who art in heaven, for his neighbors? No. That's not prayer. That's petition. When you put your order into the cosmic gift catalog, that's petitioning the Creator for a result that you want. That's a perfectly okay thing to do. But in Aramaic, the word prayer means, more literally translated, would translate as to set a trap for God. Which, in the context of our culture, you go, what do you mean to set a trap for God? Well, I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. But when you recognize that we live in an eternal energy system and that we are energetic beings, not physical beings, and you think in terms of energy, now it starts to make sense. I have an antenna on my roof. The reason I can watch Channel 2 on my TV set is I have a trap on the roof for Channel 2. If I didn't have that trap on the roof, of course, today we've got digital and all of that, but think in terms of you have an antenna on the roof. If you've got a trap for Channel 2 and it's aligned properly and oriented properly, you get a great picture and great sound because it captures the signal and feeds it into the TV set. You are designed physiologically, literally, you are the antenna, unless you've been physically or emotionally traumatized, that is designed to literally capture, as an antenna captures a signal, the energy in which you live, move, and have your being. And that energy is the flow of active present love. If you listen to what people call the Lord's Prayer, it's not a prayer at all. It's actually a set of instructions for how to realign your antenna, for how to orient yourself so that you function as you're designed to function. This is where your healing is. This is where the healing of every mind, heart, and being on the planet is when each person individually recognizes who they are and begins to align themselves so that they literally, as we're moving through space, when the scriptures talk about in him we live, move, and have our being, we are literally moving, according to the scientists, at about 7,000 miles an hour through space. Well, if you know anything about resonance and energy, if you have two systems, i.e. human and divine, that are made of the same substance in the image and likeness of each other, and those two energy systems, which literally have matching atomic magnetic structures, move through each other, there's an exchange of energy between them. Thus, the flow of active present love through your structure. And a result of that is your healing. You've got to recapture the truth of who you are. And you do that through having an understanding of what this is, this set in the mind that was called Rahma, that keeps your mind on track with love and enhances the flow, literal energetic flow of active present love through your structure. So that's where Job ends up healing. Is he goes into this state of alignment with active present love as an offering to his neighbors. By the way, in Aramaic, the word neighbor means anybody that you think about. Not just the guy you were just talking to or the guy down the block, but literally anybody that you think about is your neighbor. And if you're going to maintain your human life, you can't have a neighbor that you go into hostility or fear toward, because when you go into hostility or fear, you lose your human life. You're disconnected from it. So when Job went into that action, that's when his whole restoration occurred. It involved his neighbors. So what do you suppose, if we're going to heal this thing called war, it's going to have to happen? These warring neighbors, now again, whether the war is your interpersonal war, and as Carrie mentioned that I spoke about in this morning session, whether it's the interpersonal war with the person you're in bed with every night, or the person that lives next door to you, or your son or your daughter or your grandparent or your mother or your father, or your deceased whoever, doesn't matter whether they're alive or not. When you think of them, are you connected to that active presence of love? There's actually a great test in the Course in Miracles to determine where you are in your work. And the first part of the test is a pretty easy one. The second one it's a really tough test to pass. But the first part is, when you think of anyone, do you maintain your human life? Do you stay connected to love when you think of anyone? Are you at peace? So that's the first test. And then the second test is a tough one, because then it says, when anyone thinks of you, do they share your perfect peace? When they do, you now know that there's nothing of conflict in you that's set out into the world that would bring someone against you. It's a pretty high standard. Who could do such a thing? Only the person willing to do their work. Only the person willing to align themselves properly with the active presence of love, so that that presence of love literally, and the breath that delivers that presence of love, delivers it in the deepest part of the cellular structure, so that any untoward energy held from any generation in one's bloodline is dissolved by the movement of that breath through that trauma. Withhold the breath from that part of your structure, and you withhold healing. So it's a pretty tough standard to meet. There's work to be done, but hey, that's what we're here to do, is develop a community that creates support for doing that work. And I hope that fits and makes sense. And Carrie and Susan, I hope that adds to what we spoke of in the session this morning. And I hope that soon we'll have access to that video. We'll have permission to use it, and we'll get it on the YouTube channel and be able to share it with you. In the meantime, I join you in taking just a sweet, connected breath that ties you in to the presence of active love. That opens the gateway to solidify on every level the awareness of yourself as the created essence of love. And breathing with you on such a deep level that it becomes easy to offer that presence of love, even to the person that could be considered to be what the world would call your worst enemy. If you can't deliver active present love to what the world would call your worst enemy, then you don't have a human life. Your work, should you choose to do it, is to be restored to your human life, and then remove every block in your physiology that inhibits you from reflecting that into the world. And we're here to join you in that, and hope that you're ready for the best year yet of your eternal life. Thanks for joining us. Blessings. Bye-bye.